The pristine white ceiling of St. Mary's Children's Hospital blurred as tears welled in Alexander Wellington's eyes. He blinked them away quickly, unwilling to let his daughter see him falter. Emma's small hand rested in his, so fragile yet somehow still the strongest thing in his world. The steady beep of the monitors punctuated the silence between them as they waited for Dr. Sharma to return with the results they both already knew. "Dad, it's okay," Emma whispered, her voice carrying a maturity no 12-year-old should possess. "I already know what he's going to say." Alexander squeezed her hand gently, forcing his lips into what he hoped resembled a smile. At 48, the self-made billionaire had conquered markets, outmaneuvered competitors, and built Wellington Industries into a global empire. But sitting here, beside his daughter's hospital bed, he felt utterly powerless. "Let's wait for the doctor, Princess," he said, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her forehead. "There are always new treatments, new possibilities." Emma's blue eyes, so like her mother's, studied him with that penetrating gaze that could strip away his boardroom facade. "It's been 3 years, Dad. 7 surgeries, 4 experimental treatments, and specialists from 3 continents." Her small chest rose with a deep breath. "I think we need to accept that this is my life now." The door opened before Alexander could respond, and Dr. Sharma entered, clipboard in hand and face carefully composed into the neutral expression of a physician delivering difficult news. Alexander had seen that look 6 times before. "Mr. Wellington, Emma," Dr. Sharma nodded to each of them. "I've reviewed all the tests and consulted with the team." "Just say it," Emma said quietly. The doctor's professional composure softened as he looked at his young patient. "The nerve damage is extensive and the inflammation continues to resist our treatments. The new stem cell therapy didn't show the results we hoped for." Alexander felt his throat constrict. "What about the clinic in Switzerland? Or that new research in Tokyo?" Dr. Sharma shook his head. "I've consulted with both teams. Given the specific nature of Emma's condition, they don't believe their approaches would yield different results." Alexander stood abruptly, years of business negotiations kicking in when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. "There has to be something. Money is no object, Doctor. Whatever it takes." "Dad," Emma's voice cut through his desperation. "It's okay." He turned to see his daughter's resigned smile, and his heart shattered all over again. She had been 10 when the drunk driver crashed into their car, killing her mother instantly and leaving Emma with a spinal cord injury that confined her to a wheelchair. 2 years of watching his vibrant, athletic daughter struggle through pain, surgeries, and the cruel realization that she might never walk again had pushed Alexander to exhaust every medical possibility money could buy. "I'll leave you two to talk," Dr. Sharma said gently. "Emma's physical therapy schedule remains important for her overall health, and I'd like to adjust her pain management protocol. We can discuss that later." When the door closed behind the doctor, Alexander sank back into the chair beside Emma's bed. The weight of defeat pressed down on his shoulders. "We should go home tomorrow," Emma said after a moment. "I miss my own room, and Bailey probably misses me too." Alexander nodded, thinking of the golden retriever therapy dog he'd gotten for Emma last year. "He's been moping around the house. Maria says he sleeps outside your bedroom door." A small smile flickered across Emma's face. "See? And you have that big charity gala this weekend. You can't miss it." Alexander had completely forgotten about the annual Wellington Foundation Gala, the flagship fundraising event for his charitable organization. His assistant had been sending him increasingly urgent messages about final approvals, but they'd been the furthest thing from his mind. "I'll cancel it," he said immediately. Emma's eyes widened. "Dad, no. It raises millions for children's medical research. Besides," she added with a determined set of her jaw, "I want to go." "Emma, you just had major surgery 3 weeks ago. And I've been stuck in this hospital or our house for 2 years, she countered. "I'm not asking to go mountain climbing. It's just a fancy dinner with a bunch of rich people in uncomfortable clothes." Despite everything, Alexander felt a smile tug at his lips. There were moments, increasingly rare, when glimpses of Emma's old spirited self shone through. "We'll see how you're feeling," he conceded, "but your health comes first." The next day, Alexander's driver navigated the long, winding driveway leading to Wellington Manor. The sprawling estate sat on 30 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds in Greenwich, Connecticut, a testament to Alexander's success and the life he'd built for his family, a family that was now just the two of them. As the car approached the house, Alexander noticed Emma peering through the window at a figure working in the gardens. A young man was kneeling among the roses that Catherine, Emma's mother, had once lovingly tended. After her death, Alexander had hired the best landscapers to maintain them, unwilling to let another piece of her fade away. "Who's that?" Emma asked, her interest piqued by the unfamiliar face. Alexander squinted. "Must be one of the new groundskeepers. Mrs. Winters mentioned hiring extra help for the summer." Mrs. Winters, the estate manager who had been with the Wellingtons since before Emma was born, was waiting at the front entrance as the car pulled up. Her normally composed face creased with concern as the driver carefully helped Emma into her wheelchair. "Welcome home, dear," she said, bending to hug Emma. "We've missed you terribly." "I've missed you too," Emma replied. "And your cookies. Hospital food is still terrible." Mrs. Winters smiled. "Then you'll be pleased to know there's a fresh batch cooling in the kitchen." As they entered the grand foyer, Alexander noticed Emma's eyes drift toward the sweeping staircase that led to the second floor, to her bedroom, her art studio, the spaces that had once been her domain. Following the accident, he'd had an elevator installed and converted a downstairs guest suite into a fully accessible bedroom for her, but he still sometimes found her looking at the stairs with longing. "I think I'd like to rest a bit," Emma said, her earlier energy fading. The trip home, brief as it was, had clearly tired her. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll have your lunch brought to your room when you're ready." As Emma wheeled herself toward her suite, Alexander turned to Mrs. Winters. "No improvement," he said quietly. "Dr. Sharma says we've reached the end of the road." The older woman's face fell. "Oh, Alexander, I'm so sorry." He rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. "I don't know what to do, Agnes. I've thrown every resource, every connection I have at this problem, and nothing has worked. She's trying to be brave, but I can see her slipping away a little more each day." "That child has her mother's strength," Mrs. Winters said firmly. "And yours. Don't underestimate her." Alexander nodded, though the knot in his chest remained. "I'll be in my office. I need to deal with some foundation business before the gala." Hours later, buried in spreadsheets and donor reports, Alexander was startled by a sound he hadn't heard in months: Emma's laugh. He rose from his desk and moved to the window. Down below, in the garden, he could see Emma in her wheelchair on the stone path that wound through Catherine's roses. Beside her was the young man they'd seen earlier, now gesturing animatedly as he spoke. Whatever he was saying had Emma covering her mouth, shoulders shaking with genuine laughter. Alexander couldn't remember the last time he'd heard that sound. He watched for a moment longer as the young man, who couldn't be more than 25, knelt to show Emma something among the flowers. His daughter leaned forward in her chair, clearly engaged in whatever he was explaining. There was a lightness in her expression that had been absent for too long. Curious, and admittedly a bit protective, Alexander made his way downstairs and out to the garden. As he approached, he could hear the young man speaking. "And that's why this one's called a peace rose. Your mom had an amazing eye for varieties that would complement each other through the seasons." "You knew my mom?" Emma asked, surprise evident in her voice. The young man smiled. "Not personally, but these gardens tell her story. See how she paired these David Austin roses with the lavender? That takes knowledge and vision." Alexander cleared his throat as he stepped onto the path. Both Emma and the young man turned toward him, his daughter's face brightening. "Dad, come meet Elijah. He knows everything about Mom's roses." The young man stood quickly, wiping soil from his hands onto his worn jeans before extending one toward Alexander. "Elijah Carter, sir. I'm one of the new groundskeepers Mrs. Winters hired." Alexander shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Despite his casual clothes and the dirt under his fingernails, there was a self-assurance about Elijah that seemed at odds with his position. "Alexander Wellington, I see you've met my daughter." "Emma was asking about the different rose varieties," Elijah explained. "She mentioned her mother planted them." "They were my wife's passion," Alexander said, a familiar ache blooming in his chest at the mention of Catherine. "She spent hours out here." Emma wheeled herself slightly forward. "Elijah was just telling me how Mom created a continuous bloom cycle so there would always be something flowering from spring through late fall. I never knew that." Alexander hadn't known it either. Catherine had tried to explain her gardening philosophy to him many times, but he'd been too consumed with building his company to truly listen. It stung to realize this stranger knew more about his wife's beloved roses than he did. "That's thoughtful of you to share with her," he managed, studying the young man more carefully. Elijah Carter was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of hours working outdoors. His dark hair was cut short on the sides but longer on top, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, held a quiet intelligence. He was dressed simply in a faded blue t-shirt and work pants, yet carried himself with a dignity that seemed incongruous with his role as a gardener. "I should get back to work," Elijah said, seeming to sense Alexander's assessment. "It was nice meeting you, Emma, Mr. Wellington." He nodded respectfully before turning back to the rose beds. "He's interesting," Emma commented as Alexander wheeled her back toward the house. "He was studying medicine before he had to drop out to take care of his grandmother." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You learned all that in one conversation?" Emma shrugged. "He's easy to talk to. Not like the tutors or physical therapists who always treat me like I'm made of glass." She glanced back over her shoulder at Elijah, who was now carefully pruning a climbing rose. "And he doesn't look at my wheelchair first and me second." The observation struck Alexander hard. How many people in their social circle still did exactly that? Defined Emma by her disability rather than seeing the bright, determined girl she remained. He'd been so focused on finding a cure, on fixing what was broken, that perhaps he'd been guilty of the same. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can we have dinner on the terrace tonight? It's been so long since I've eaten outside." "Of course," he agreed immediately, grateful for her renewed interest in something as simple as dinner location. "I'll have Mrs. Winters arrange it." That evening, as they dined under the soft glow of string lights on the terrace, Alexander noticed Emma's gaze drifting repeatedly to the gardens where Elijah was still working despite the late hour. He moved methodically among the plants, his attention completely absorbed in his task. "He's dedicated," Alexander observed, following her line of sight. Emma nodded. "He told me he's saving money for medical school. His grandmother got sick during his second year, and he had to withdraw to become her caretaker. She passed away 6 months ago." Alexander felt a flicker of sympathy. He knew all too well how quickly life could derail even the most carefully laid plans. "That's unfortunate. Medical school is expensive." "He'll get there," Emma said with surprising conviction. "He's not giving up on his dream." The next morning, Alexander found himself watching the gardens from his office window again. Emma was there, her wheelchair positioned beside a marble bench as Elijah carefully trimmed the nearby shrubs. Alexander couldn't hear their conversation, but he could see Emma gesturing animatedly, her face more alive than it had been in months. Something tugged at his heart, a mix of gratitude that his daughter seemed happier, and an inexplicable unease about this stranger who had so quickly gained her trust. He'd had Mrs. Winters run a background check, of course. Standard procedure for all household staff. Elijah Carter, 26, had a clean record, good references from previous landscaping jobs, and as Emma had mentioned, 2 years of pre-med at Johns Hopkins before withdrawing. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant reminding him of an urgent conference call. With a last glance at the pair in the garden, he returned to his desk, pushing aside his concerns to focus on business. The Wellington Foundation Gala was 3 days away, and despite Emma's earlier enthusiasm, Alexander wasn't sure she was strong enough to attend. That evening, as they shared dinner on the terrace again, something that was becoming a habit, he broached the subject carefully. "The doctors said you should be resting, Emma. The gala will be exhausting. Hundreds of people, hours of sitting in one position, noise, commotion." Emma set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Dad, we've been through this. I want to go. I need to go." "Need?" Alexander frowned. "Why need?" "Because," she said, meeting his gaze steadily, "I'm tired of being the fragile daughter everyone whispers about. Poor Emma Wellington, such a tragedy. I want people to see me as more than just my injury." Alexander felt the familiar ache in his chest. She was so much like Catherine, the same determined set of her jaw, the same unflinching directness. "Besides," Emma continued, "it's important to you and the foundation, and it's important to me too. Mom always said the foundation's work was the most meaningful thing we did as a family." She had him there. Catherine had been the driving force behind establishing the Wellington Foundation, insisting that their wealth came with an obligation to give back. The annual gala raised millions for children's medical research, including research into spinal cord injuries like Emma's. "All right," he conceded, "but we'll leave early if you get tired, and you'll tell me immediately if you're in pain." Emma beamed, and Alexander would have agreed to far more difficult terms to keep that smile on her face. "Deal," she said, "and I want a new dress. Something amazing." The request surprised him. Emma had shown little interest in clothing since the accident, preferring comfortable, practical options that accommodated her wheelchair, but the spark in her eyes made it impossible to refuse. "Mrs. Winters can take you shopping tomorrow." "Actually," Emma said hesitantly, "I was hoping Maria could help me order something online. I found a designer who specializes in adaptive fashion, and her dresses are incredible, elegant but designed for wheelchair users." Alexander nodded, trying to mask his emotion at this small but significant sign that Emma was beginning to adapt to her new reality rather than merely endure it. "Whatever you want, Princess." The following day, Alexander was in back-to-back meetings when Mrs. Winters knocked on his office door, her expression troubled. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Wellington, but there's a situation with Emma." Alexander was immediately on his feet. "Is she hurt? Do we need an ambulance?" No, nothing like that," Mrs. Winters assured him. "She's fine physically, but, well, she's with that new gardener again. They've been together all morning. Maria says Emma even skipped her physical therapy session to continue their conversation." Alexander frowned. Emma never skipped therapy. "Where are they now?" "In the East Garden. The young man appears to be showing her some kind of therapeutic exercises." Alexander strode through the house and out onto the east lawn, where a small meditation garden provided a secluded retreat from the main grounds. As he approached, he could hear Emma's laughter again, a sound that both warmed his heart and quickened his pace with concern. When he rounded the corner, he stopped short. Emma was out of her wheelchair, seated on a yoga mat spread on the grass. Elijah knelt beside her, supporting her back with one hand while gently moving her leg with the other, in what appeared to be a stretching exercise. Both were so engrossed in their task that neither noticed Alexander's approach. "This is just like the technique we used with grandmother," Elijah was saying. "The doctors said her mobility would never improve after her stroke, but within 6 months, she could walk with a cane." "Really?" Emma's voice was breathless with a hope that made Alexander's chest tighten. "And you think it could help me?" "Your case is different, of course," Elijah said, his tone measured. "But these movements stimulate neural pathways and improve circulation. At minimum, they should help with muscle tone and reduce pain." "It doesn't hurt at all," Emma marveled. Usually, when the physical therapists stretch my legs, it's uncomfortable, but this feels different. Alexander cleared his throat loudly, causing both of them to look up in surprise. "Dad!" Emma exclaimed. "Elijah was just showing me some therapeutic techniques he used with his grandmother." Alexander eyed the young man with barely concealed suspicion. "I wasn't aware that gardening duties now included physical therapy." Elijah carefully helped Emma back into her wheelchair before standing to face Alexander. "I apologize if I overstepped, Mr. Wellington. Emma mentioned she was experiencing more pain than usual after the car ride home, and I offered to show her some exercises that might help." Elijah studied physical therapy as part of his pre-med curriculum, Emma added quickly, and he took care of his grandmother for years. "Nevertheless," Alexander said, struggling to maintain his composure, "Emma has professional physical therapists and doctors managing her care. Well-meaning amateur advice could be harmful." Elijah's expression remained respectful, but Alexander noticed a flash of something, perhaps defiance, in those green eyes. "Of course, sir. I meant no harm." "Dad?" Emma protested. "It was helping. I felt—" "We'll discuss this later, Emma," Alexander interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. To Elijah, he added, "I think it's best if you return to your assigned duties, Mr. Carter." Elijah nodded once. "Yes, sir." He turned to Emma with a gentler expression. "Remember to breathe deeply through the exercises I showed you. Oxygen circulation is crucial for neural regeneration." With that, he walked away, back straight and head high despite the dismissal. As soon as he was out of earshot, Emma wheeled to face her father, eyes flashing. "How could you be so rude? He was only trying to help." Alexander knelt beside her wheelchair. "Emma, I understand you like this young man, but he's not a doctor. He's a gardener with some incomplete medical education. Your condition is complex and delicate." "That's just it, Dad. He doesn't treat me like I'm delicate. He treats me like I'm a person who might get better, not a hopeless case to be managed." The words struck Alexander like a physical blow. "Is that how you feel the doctors treat you? How I treat you?" Emma's anger deflated slightly. "Not you, Dad, but the doctors. Yes, sometimes. They've given up on me walking again. They just want to maintain my quality of life now." Alexander took her hand. "Emma, I will never give up on you. But we need to trust the medical experts who've been overseeing your case, not a gardener with unverified theories." "His grandmother had a severe stroke that paralyzed her entire left side," Emma said stubbornly. "The doctors said she'd never walk again either." But Elijah developed a therapy regimen that combined Eastern and Western techniques, and she regained enough mobility to walk with assistance. Alexander sighed, recognizing the stubborn determination in his daughter's eyes. It was the same look Catherine had worn when she set her mind to something. "I'm not saying he's lying about his grandmother, but spinal cord injuries are entirely different from stroke recovery. The damage to your nerves—" "I know my prognosis, Dad," Emma interrupted softly. "I've heard it enough times. But what's the harm in trying something new when the traditional approaches have failed?" Alexander had no ready answer for that. The last thing he wanted was to extinguish the fragile flame of hope that seemed to have reignited in his daughter. But he also couldn't bear the thought of her being disappointed yet again when miraculous results failed to materialize. "Let's discuss this after the gala," he finally said. "In the meantime, please don't skip your regular therapy sessions." Emma nodded, though the determined glint remained in her eyes. "Fine. But Dad, promise me you'll keep an open mind." "I promise to consider any approach that might help you," he said carefully. "But I need to do my due diligence first." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Alexander found himself sitting in his study, a glass of scotch untouched beside him as he scrolled through search results on his laptop. He'd been researching alternative physical therapy approaches for spinal cord injuries, particularly those combining Eastern and Western medicine, as Emma had mentioned. There were promising studies, certainly, though nothing that suggested the kind of dramatic improvement Elijah had hinted at. Just as he was about to close the computer, a knock sounded at the door. "Enter," he called, expecting Mrs. Winters with her nightly household update. Instead, Elijah Carter stood in the doorway, still in his work clothes, but with an intensity in his expression that made Alexander straighten in his chair. "Mr. Carter, this is unexpected." "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Wellington," Elijah said, stepping into the room but remaining near the door. "I felt I needed to speak with you directly, away from Emma." Alexander gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." Elijah did so, his posture erect but not stiff. There was a quiet confidence about him that Alexander might have admired under different circumstances. "First," Elijah began, "I want to apologize if I overstepped my boundaries today. That was never my intention. Yet you took it upon yourself to administer physical therapy to my daughter without consulting me or her medical team," Alexander replied, his tone measured but cold. Elijah nodded. "I understand how that appears, sir. But what I showed Emma was a basic therapeutic stretching technique, nothing invasive or dangerous. When she mentioned her pain, I simply offered what I knew had helped others." "Including your grandmother?" Emma mentioned her stroke. "Yes. The doctors gave her a similar prognosis to Emma's, that she would never regain function. But through a combination of techniques I researched and developed, she was able to walk again with assistance." Alexander leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, I've spent 2 years and millions of dollars consulting the world's leading specialists in spinal cord injury. Every one of them has told me that Emma's particular injury makes walking again highly improbable. Are you suggesting you know something they don't?" Elijah met his gaze unflinchingly. "With all due respect, sir, sometimes specialists become so focused on conventional approaches that they miss possibilities outside their training." "And you believe you've discovered such a possibility?" "I believe," Elijah said carefully, "that the human body has remarkable healing capabilities that Western medicine doesn't fully understand or utilize." Alexander studied the young man before him. There was no hint of the charlatan about him, no grandiose promises or slick salesmanship, just a quiet conviction that was difficult to dismiss outright. "Sir," Elijah continued when Alexander remained silent, "I can make your daughter walk again." The words hung in the air between them. Alexander froze, a storm of emotions crossing his face: hope, disbelief, suspicion, and a desperate desire to believe. "That's an extraordinary claim," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, and I wouldn't make it if I wasn't certain of my ability to help her. I've been studying neuroplasticity and regenerative therapy since my first year at Johns Hopkins. What happened with my grandmother wasn't luck. It was the result of specific techniques that stimulate neural pathways in ways conventional physical therapy doesn't address." Alexander stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness that had settled over the estate. "Why are you telling me this now? Why not continue your sessions with Emma behind my back?" "Because I respect you, and I respect the love you have for your daughter," Elijah replied simply. "And because to truly help Emma, I would need your support, both for her morale and for practical resources." Alexander turned back to face Elijah, his expression unreadable. "What kind of resources are we talking about?" "A dedicated space for daily therapy sessions, specialized equipment I'd need to order, and most importantly, your trust and patience. This isn't a quick fix, Mr. Wellington. It would be a long process, possibly a year or more of intensive work." Alexander returned to his seat, studying Elijah with the same penetrating gaze he used on potential business partners. "You understand my skepticism. Every doctor we've consulted has said Emma's case is hopeless." "I don't believe any case is hopeless," Elijah replied. "Difficult, yes. Requiring dedication and innovative approaches, certainly, but not hopeless." "And what would you gain from this arrangement, Mr. Carter, besides continuing employment as a groundskeeper?" A flash of something, perhaps offense, crossed Elijah's face before his expression smoothed again. The opportunity to apply and refine the techniques I've developed. Documentation of Emma's progress to support my eventual return to medical school. And yes, financial stability while I work toward that goal. Alexander leaned back in his chair. So my daughter would be, what? A case study? A stepping stone for your career? No, sir, Elijah said firmly. Emma would be a patient I believe I can help. The fact that helping her might also advance my research is secondary. The room fell silent as Alexander considered the young man's words. He'd built his fortune by recognizing opportunity and taking calculated risks, by trusting his instincts about people. Those instincts were sending mixed signals about Elijah Carter. Tell me about your grandmother, he said finally. Her condition, her recovery. Elijah's face softened. She raised me after my parents died when I was 8. She was everything to me, my only family. 3 years ago, she suffered a massive stroke that paralyzed her left side. The doctors said she'd never walk again, never regain function in her left arm. And yet you claim she did. Not claim, Mr. Wellington. She did. I can provide her medical records, statements from her doctors. It took 18 months of daily therapy, a regimen I researched and developed by combining traditional physical therapy with Eastern medicine approaches, neuroplasticity exercises, and emerging regenerative techniques. Alexander's eyes narrowed. If you achieved such remarkable results, why hasn't the medical community taken notice? Because her case was dismissed as an anomaly, Elijah said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. Her primary doctor attributed her recovery to unexplained spontaneous improvement. The neurologist suggested it was because her brain found alternative pathways, which was partly true but deliberately ignores the methods that stimulated those pathways. It was a familiar story. Alexander had encountered similar resistance from the medical establishment when seeking experimental treatments for Emma. The caution of mainstream medicine, often necessary and appropriate, could become a stifling orthodoxy in some cases. You mentioned your approach combines several techniques, Alexander said. Could you be more specific? Elijah nodded. It integrates intensive physical stimulation of neural pathways, targeted circulatory enhancement, proprioceptive recalibration, and mental visualization techniques. The key innovation is the precise sequencing and combination of these approaches, which creates a synergistic effect conventional therapy doesn't achieve. The terminology was medical enough to suggest genuine knowledge, yet Alexander remained wary. And you believe this approach could work for Emma's specific condition? I'd need to review her complete medical records to be certain, but based on what she's told me about her injury, yes. The approach would need to be customized for her case, of course. Alexander drummed his fingers on the desk. Mr. Carter, I'm sure you can understand my position. I would do anything, pay any amount, to help my daughter walk again. But that makes me vulnerable to false hope, which Emma can't afford at this stage of her recovery. I understand completely, Elijah replied. That's why I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I can provide documentation of my grandmother's case, references from the therapists who eventually acknowledged the effectiveness of my methods, even the research papers I've co-authored, though they don't explicitly detail my full approach. It was a reasonable offer, more than reasonable. Yet Alexander still hesitated. And if I were to allow this, what exactly would it entail for Emma? Daily sessions? For how long? What would she experience? Initially, daily sessions of about 2 hours. The regimen would include specialized stretching and stimulation exercises, hydrotherapy when possible, and mental techniques to re-establish neural connections. It's intense but not painful. In fact, many patients find it gives immediate relief from the discomfort of immobility. Alexander nodded slowly. And the equipment you mentioned? Specialized mats and supports, a portable hydrotherapy unit, electrical stimulation devices, nothing invasive or experimental, all approved therapeutic tools just used in my specific protocol. The cost? Elijah hesitated. For the equipment, perhaps $50,000 to start. As for my compensation. He paused, seemingly uncomfortable with the topic. Alexander waved a hand dismissively. Money isn't the issue, Mr. Carter. If, and this remains a significant if, I were to allow you to work with Emma, you would be fairly compensated for your time and expertise. Another silence fell between them as Alexander weighed his options. The potential benefit was enormous, life-changing for Emma. The risk seemed relatively small, assuming Elijah's methods were as non-invasive as he claimed. Yet Alexander couldn't shake his unease. I need time to consider this, he said finally, and to verify the information you've offered. Of course, Elijah replied, reaching into his pocket to produce a small flash drive. This contains my grandmother's medical records before and after, documentation of the therapy regimen, the research papers I mentioned, and my contact information for any questions you might have. Alexander accepted the drive, noting the preparedness it represented. Elijah had clearly anticipated this conversation. Thank you. I'll review these materials and speak with Emma's doctors. I'll give you my answer after the foundation gala. Elijah stood, recognizing the dismissal. Thank you for hearing me out, Mr. Wellington. Whatever you decide, I believe Emma has more potential for recovery than her doctors have acknowledged. After Elijah left, Alexander sat for a long time, turning the flash drive over in his hands. Part of him, the protective father, wanted to dismiss Elijah's claims outright, to shield Emma from another disappointment. But another part, the businessman who had built an empire by recognizing unconventional opportunities, was intrigued. He plugged the drive into his laptop and began reviewing the files, his skepticism gradually giving way to cautious interest. The medical records appeared legitimate, documenting a remarkable recovery. The research papers, while not published in top-tier journals, showed sound methodology. Most compelling were the videos, time-lapse documentation of Elijah's grandmother progressing from complete left-side paralysis to walking with a cane. By the time he closed his laptop hours later, Alexander had decided to at least consult with Emma's medical team about Elijah's approach. If nothing else, the young man's method seemed unlikely to cause harm, and the potential benefit. Alexander wouldn't allow himself to complete the thought. Hope was a dangerous thing when it came to Emma's condition. He'd learned that lesson through too many disappointments. The next morning, Alexander found Emma already awake and sitting in the garden when he went down for breakfast. To his surprise, she was attempting some of the stretching exercises he'd seen Elijah showing her. "Morning, Dad," she called, a flush of healthy color in her cheeks. "I feel better today. The exercises really help with the stiffness." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "That's good to hear, Princess. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Usually my legs ache at night, but they didn't last night." She looked up at him with cautious optimism. "Have you thought more about letting Elijah help me?" Alexander sat beside her on the garden bench. "I spoke with him last night, actually. He made some interesting claims about his therapeutic approach." Emma's eyes widened. "He came to talk to you? What did he say? What did you tell him?" "He gave me some information to review, which I did. I'm going to consult with Dr. Sharma before making any decisions." Emma's face fell slightly. "You don't believe he can help me?" "I didn't say that," Alexander replied carefully. "But I need to be thorough, Emma. This is your health we're talking about." "I know, Dad. But—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I feel different after just trying his exercises a few times, like something's waking up inside me. It's hard to explain." Alexander studied his daughter's face, noting the animation in her features that had been missing for so long. Was it just the excitement of a new approach, or something more? "Your dress arrived, by the way," he said, changing the subject. "Maria put it in your room. Would you like to try it on before breakfast?" Emma nodded, though he could see she was disappointed by his deflection. "Sure, I hope it fits properly. Adaptive fashion can be tricky." As he wheeled her back toward the house, Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dr. Sharma. Perfect timing. "I need to take this, Princess. I'll meet you inside." Emma continued toward the house while Alexander answered the call, walking deeper into the garden for privacy. "Dr. Sharma, thank you for getting back to me so quickly." "Of course, Mr. Wellington. Your message sounded urgent. You mentioned a new therapeutic approach for Emma?" Alexander explained Elijah's background and proposed methods, trying to present the information as neutrally as possible despite his own conflicted feelings. There was a long pause after he finished. "Mr. Wellington," Dr. Sharma finally said, his tone measured, "while I appreciate your thoroughness in researching options for Emma, I must caution you against unconventional approaches from practitioners without proper credentials. Even if those approaches have documented success in similar cases, anecdotal evidence from a single case, particularly one involving a different condition, doesn't constitute clinical validation," Dr. Sharma replied. "Stroke recovery and spinal cord injury are fundamentally different medical challenges." "With all due respect, Doctor," Alexander said, struggling to keep frustration from his voice, "we've followed conventional approaches for 2 years with minimal improvement. At what point do we consider alternatives?" "I understand your frustration, Mr. Wellington," Dr. Sharma replied, his tone sympathetic yet firm. "But there's a reason medical protocols exist. Unproven treatments can create false hope, or worse, cause harm. Elijah's techniques don't appear invasive or dangerous. They're essentially modified physical therapy exercises combined with elements from other established disciplines. Perhaps, but without proper medical supervision and clinical validation." "What if you provided that supervision?" Alexander interrupted. "You could review his methods, monitor Emma's progress, ensure nothing inappropriate is happening." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You're really considering this, aren't you?" "I'm considering anything that might help my daughter," Alexander replied. "Anything that gives her hope." Dr. Sharma sighed. "I can review the information you've mentioned, but I must emphasize that I cannot endorse or participate in unproven therapeutic regimens. All I'm asking is that you look at what he's proposing with an open mind." "I'll do that much," the doctor conceded. "Send me the files and we can discuss further after I've reviewed them." Alexander ended the call feeling both frustrated and conflicted. The medical establishment's caution was understandable, necessary even, but it offered little comfort when your child was suffering. Inside the house, he found Emma in her room with Maria, the live-in nurse who had been with them since the accident. The adaptive dress they'd ordered lay across the bed, an elegant emerald green creation with clever design elements that made it both wheelchair-friendly and fashionable. "Dad, it's perfect!" Emma exclaimed as he entered. "Look how it's cut to avoid bunching when I'm seated, but it still has the silhouette of a regular evening gown." Alexander smiled, grateful for her enthusiasm. "It's beautiful, Princess. You'll be the belle of the gala." Maria, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and practical hands, was making minor adjustments to the dress. "Just a few stitches to perfect the fit," she explained. "Emma will outshine everyone. Maria's going to help me practice getting in and out of it before Saturday," Emma added, "and we're experimenting with hairstyles that won't interfere with my mobility." The casual way she referenced her condition, something that would have been unthinkable months ago, gave Alexander pause. Was this Elijah's influence as well? This gradual acceptance of her situation while still hoping for improvement? "I'm sure you'll look stunning," he said. "Now I have some foundation business to attend to before lunch. Call if you need anything." In his office, Alexander forwarded Elijah's files to Dr. Sharma, then tried to focus on the final preparations for the gala. The annual event raised millions for the Wellington Foundation's medical research grants, including substantial funding for spinal cord injury studies. The irony wasn't lost on him, championing research that had yet to help his own daughter. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Winters stood in the doorway, her expression troubled. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I thought you should know. Emma is in the pool with Mr. Carter. Alexander's head snapped up. The pool? Emma hasn't been swimming since the accident, I know, Mrs. Winters finished. Maria is supervising and they're using the pool lift, but I thought perhaps you should see what they're doing. Alexander was already on his feet, moving swiftly through the house toward the indoor pool in the east wing. The glass-enclosed space had been Catherine's pride, a beautiful oasis with tropical plants surrounding a heated pool designed for year-round use. After Emma's accident, it had sat largely unused, a painful reminder of activities she could no longer enjoy. Through the glass doors, he could see them. Emma was in the water, supported by special flotation devices, while Elijah moved her legs in gentle, rhythmic motions. Maria watched attentively from the pool's edge. What struck Alexander most was Emma's face, eyes closed, expression serene, a small smile playing at her lips. He pushed open the door quietly, not wanting to disrupt whatever was happening. The humid air enveloped him as he approached the pool's edge. The water provides ideal resistance while removing gravitational constraints, Elijah was explaining to Maria. It allows for movement patterns that would be impossible on land at this stage. The warmth feels amazing, Emma said, her eyes still closed. Like my muscles are finally relaxing. That's the increased circulation, Elijah replied. We're stimulating blood flow to areas that have been relatively dormant. Your body remembers how to do this, Emma. We're just reminding it. Alexander cleared his throat, and 3 heads turned in his direction. Emma's face lit up. Dad, look, I'm swimming. Well, sort of. Elijah says hydrotherapy is a key component of his approach. Elijah met Alexander's gaze steadily, neither defensive nor apologetic. Mr. Wellington, I hope this is all right. Emma mentioned the pool, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to demonstrate some of the techniques I discussed with you. I gave permission, Mr. Wellington, Maria added quickly. I've been monitoring everything carefully. It seems to be helping with Emma's comfort level. Alexander took a breath, forcing himself to assess the situation objectively rather than react emotionally. Emma was clearly enjoying herself. The exercises appeared gentle and controlled, and Maria's presence ensured nothing inappropriate was occurring. It's fine, he said finally, but in the future, I'd appreciate being informed before new therapies are introduced. Of course, Elijah nodded. I should have spoken to you first. My enthusiasm got ahead of my judgment. It's my fault, Dad, Emma interjected. I practically begged him to show me after he mentioned hydrotherapy. And honestly, I feel better than I have in months. Alexander watched as Elijah guided Emma through another series of movements, noting the careful attention he paid to her reactions, the gentle adjustments he made when she showed any sign of discomfort. There was nothing inappropriate about his manner. It was clinical, focused, yet still somehow compassionate. How long will you continue today? He asked. Another 15 minutes, Elijah replied. We don't want to overdo it on the first session. The goal is gradual progress without fatigue or strain. Alexander nodded. I'll leave you to it then. Emma, I'll be in my office if you need me. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. Dad, thank you for not being angry. This feels right. I can't explain it, but it does. The sincerity in her voice gave him pause. It had been so long since he'd heard that tone from her, that genuine belief that something good might happen. Back in his office, Alexander found himself unable to focus on the gala preparations. His thoughts kept returning to the scene at the pool, to Emma's contentment, to the methodical care in Elijah's approach. Was he being overly cautious in his skepticism, or appropriately protective of a vulnerable child who'd already endured too much disappointment? His phone rang, Dr. Sharma calling back already. I've reviewed the materials you sent, the doctor said without preamble. It's not what I expected. Meaning? The methodology is more grounded in established science than I anticipated. The integration of techniques is unconventional, certainly, but there's legitimate theory behind most of the components. And the documentation of his grandmother's case is quite thorough. Alexander felt a surge of hope. So you think it could help Emma? I didn't say that, Dr. Sharma cautioned. Stroke recovery and spinal cord injury are fundamentally different, but there are elements of his approach that align with emerging research in neural plasticity. The risk of physical harm seems minimal, assuming proper supervision. That's more open-minded than I expected from you, Doctor. Don't misunderstand me, Mr. Wellington. I'm not endorsing this approach or suggesting it will enable Emma to walk again. The damage to her spinal cord is severe and, by all conventional understanding, permanent. But if these exercises improve her comfort and quality of life, as you've suggested they already are, well, there's value in that. Alexander leaned back in his chair. So, you wouldn't object to a trial period? With proper medical oversight, no. But please, manage your expectations, and more importantly, Emma's. Improvements in comfort, range of motion, even some increased sensation would be significant achievements. Walking again remains highly improbable. Understood, Alexander replied, though part of him refused to abandon hope entirely. Thank you for keeping an open mind. After ending the call, Alexander sat quietly, weighing his options. The rational businessman in him recognized that pursuing Elijah's approach was a calculated risk with limited downside. If it failed, Emma would be disappointed, but no more so than she had been by conventional treatments. If it succeeded even partially, her quality of life might improve significantly. And if by some miracle it worked as Elijah claimed, the thought sent his heart racing, and he deliberately reined it in. False hope was crueler than no hope at all. A text from his assistant reminded him of a video conference in 5 minutes, donors wanting updates on how their contributions would be recognized at the gala. With an effort, Alexander shifted his focus back to work. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and calls. It was nearly evening when he finally emerged from his office, surprised to find Emma and Elijah in the library, surrounded by medical textbooks and anatomical diagrams spread across a large table. Connects to the anterior column here, Elijah was saying, tracing a path on one of the diagrams. That's why the specific sequencing of exercises matters so much. Emma looked up as Alexander entered. Dad, Elijah's explaining exactly how his therapy targets neural regeneration. It's fascinating. I see that, Alexander replied, noting the eager animation in his daughter's face. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Elijah said, straightening. We were just finishing up. I should get back to my other duties. Actually, Mr. Carter, I'd like a word with you first, Alexander said. Emma, would you excuse us? A flash of anxiety crossed Emma's face, but she nodded. Sure, I'll be in my room finalizing details for Saturday. After she wheeled herself out, Alexander turned to Elijah. I've consulted with Dr. Sharma about your proposed therapy. Elijah's expression remained carefully neutral, though Alexander detected a flicker of tension in his shoulders. And what did the doctor say? He was more open to your approach than I expected, Alexander admitted. With proper supervision, he sees minimal risk in attempting a trial period. The relief on Elijah's face was subtle but unmistakable. That's good news. Many doctors are dismissive of integrative approaches without even examining the evidence. Dr. Sharma isn't entirely convinced it will help Emma walk again, Alexander cautioned. He believes improvements in comfort and mobility are the most we should expect. With respect to Dr. Sharma, conventional medicine has significant blind spots when it comes to neurological regeneration, Elijah replied. The human body's capacity for healing exceeds what most medical textbooks acknowledge. Alexander studied the young man before him, his quiet confidence, his careful articulation of complex concepts, the passion that seemed to animate him when discussing his therapeutic approach. There was something compelling about him, something that made Alexander want to believe. I've decided to give your methods a trial, he said finally. 3 months. We'll evaluate Emma's progress at regular intervals, with Dr. Sharma conducting independent assessments. Elijah nodded, his expression solemn. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Wellington. I promise you won't regret it." "I'm not doing this for you, Mr. Carter," Alexander replied. "I'm doing it for Emma, and I need to be absolutely clear about something. If at any point I believe you're giving her false hope or causing her harm, physical or emotional, this arrangement ends immediately." "I understand completely." Elijah hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing you should know. The therapy works best when conducted daily, ideally at consistent times. I would need to adjust my role here to accommodate that schedule." "That won't be a problem. Mrs. Winters can reassign your groundskeeping duties. You'll be compensated appropriately for your time as Emma's therapist." "Thank you, sir. When would you like to begin?" Alexander considered the question. "After the gala. Emma's excited about attending and I don't want to exhaust her beforehand. We can start formally on Monday." "Perfect. That gives me time to order the specialized equipment we'll need. In the meantime, I can show Emma and Maria some preparatory exercises that will help ease the transition." Alexander nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation. "I'll have a therapy space prepared in the East Wing. The room adjacent to the pool would be ideal, I think." "It would," Elijah agreed. "The proximity to hydrotherapy is valuable, and the natural light will be beneficial for Emma's circadian regulation, which impacts neural recovery." There was a beat of silence before Alexander spoke again. "Mr. Carter, Elijah, I want to believe you can help my daughter, but I've seen her hopes raised and dashed too many times. Please be honest with her about the challenges ahead." "I will," Elijah promised. "False hope helps no one. Emma will face difficulties, setbacks, days when progress seems impossible. But I truly believe she can improve significantly, perhaps even achieve what her doctors have deemed impossible." "I hope you're right," Alexander said, the words catching slightly in his throat. With their arrangement settled, Alexander spent the following days ensuring everything was in place for Emma's new therapy regimen. He ordered the equipment Elijah had specified, consulted with contractors about modifying the space adjacent to the pool, and had long conversations with Dr. Sharma about monitoring protocols. Through it all, Emma's spirits remained higher than he'd seen in months. She continued practicing the preliminary exercises Elijah had shown her, reporting improvements in comfort and even sensation in areas that had been numb since the accident. "I felt a tingling in my left thigh this morning," she told Alexander over breakfast on Saturday, the day of the gala. "It wasn't much, but it was definitely there." Alexander tempered his reaction, remembering Dr. Sharma's warnings about managing expectations. "That's wonderful, Emma. Just remember to take things slowly." "I know, Dad. Elijah says the same thing. He's very clear that recovery is a marathon, not a sprint." She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Though he also says some people run marathons faster than others." Alexander couldn't help but smile in return. Emma's renewed optimism was infectious, even as the rational part of his mind warned against hoping too much, too soon. The afternoon passed in a flurry of final preparations for the gala. Alexander was on the phone with event coordinators and major donors, ensuring everything was perfect for the Foundation's biggest fundraising night of the year. Emma spent hours with Maria, getting ready with an enthusiasm for her appearance that had been absent since the accident. When she finally emerged from her room, Alexander felt his breath catch. The emerald gown complemented her auburn hair perfectly, the clever design allowing her to look elegant while seated in her wheelchair. Maria had arranged her hair in a sophisticated updo with soft tendrils framing her face. For a moment she looked so much like Catherine that Alexander's heart ached. "You look beautiful, princess," he said, kissing her cheek. "Absolutely stunning." Emma beamed. "Thanks, Dad. You don't look so bad yourself." Alexander adjusted his bow tie self-consciously. "I suppose I clean up decently for an old businessman." The drive to the gala venue, a historic mansion in Greenwich converted into an event space, was filled with Emma's excited chatter. She'd been largely absent from social events since the accident, and while Alexander had worried about her stamina, he couldn't deny the positive effect the anticipation had on her spirits. "Will Elijah be there tonight?" she asked suddenly. Alexander shook his head. "It's a donors and beneficiaries event, Emma. Elijah is neither." "He could be a beneficiary," she pointed out. "His research aligns perfectly with the Foundation's mission." "Perhaps in the future," Alexander allowed, making a mental note to explore the possibility. If Elijah's methods proved effective, funding his return to medical school through a foundation grant might indeed be appropriate. The gala was in full swing when they arrived. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements gracing every table. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Alexander had attended countless such events, but tonight felt different with Emma at his side. As they entered, heads turned. Many attendees hadn't seen Emma since before the accident. Alexander watched protectively as people approached, noting which ones looked first at her wheelchair and which ones met her eyes directly. "Emma, darling, you look exquisite," said Vivian Holbrook, the Foundation's board chair and an old friend of Catherine's. "That color is divine on you." "Thank you, Mrs. Holbrook," Emma replied with the poise she'd inherited from her mother. "It's good to be out again, and we're delighted to have you here. Your father tells me you've been making progress with your recovery?" Emma's eyes brightened. "Yes, actually. We're starting a new therapeutic approach next week that shows a lot of promise." Alexander felt a momentary panic. He hadn't intended to discuss Elijah's unconventional treatment with the Foundation board, but Vivian merely smiled and squeezed Emma's hand. "That's wonderful news, dear. Your mother would be so proud of your resilience." As the evening progressed, Alexander kept a careful eye on Emma, watching for signs of fatigue. To his surprise, she seemed energized by the social interaction, confidently navigating conversations and genuinely enjoying herself. Several times he heard her explaining aspects of spinal cord injury research to interested donors, displaying a knowledge of the subject that impressed even him. "Your daughter is remarkable, Alex," commented Richard Garrett, CEO of a major pharmaceutical company and longtime Foundation supporter. "Her understanding of the research is sophisticated." "She's been studying intensively," Alexander replied. "It's personal for her, obviously." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "The Foundation's work in regenerative medicine is groundbreaking. With advocates like Emma, I'm optimistic about breakthroughs in the near future." The time came for Alexander's speech, a tradition at each year's gala. As he took the podium, he saw Emma in the front row, her face glowing with pride. "Distinguished guests, friends, supporters of the Wellington Foundation," he began, his voice resonating through the ballroom. "Your generosity fuels the cutting-edge research that will transform lives affected by neurological injuries and diseases." He continued with the prepared remarks, highlighting the Foundation's achievements over the past year: clinical trials initiated, research grants awarded, innovations developed. But as he spoke, he found himself deviating from the script. "Many of you know that this cause became deeply personal for my family 2 years ago, when my daughter Emma suffered a spinal cord injury," he said, his voice softening. "Tonight marks her first public appearance since the accident, and I can't express how proud I am of her courage and determination." A warm round of applause filled the room, with many guests rising to their feet in respect. Emma blushed but sat tall in her wheelchair, accepting the acknowledgement with grace. "The conventional wisdom tells us that certain injuries are permanent, certain conditions untreatable," Alexander continued, surprising himself with the direction his speech was taking. "But I've learned that medical science is constantly evolving, that what seems impossible today may be routine tomorrow. And sometimes the most promising innovations come from unexpected sources, from those willing to challenge established thinking." He caught himself, aware of several board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The Wellington Foundation funded established, peer-reviewed research, not experimental treatments. Yet here he was, on the verge of publicly endorsing alternative approaches. What I mean to say, Alexander continued smoothly, is that your generosity tonight ensures we can explore every avenue, leaving no stone unturned in our search for treatments that will change lives like Emma's. Thank you for your continued support. The applause was enthusiastic, though Alexander noted a few puzzled glances exchanged among the medical researchers present. He returned to his seat beside Emma, who gave his hand a quick squeeze. "Great speech, Dad," she whispered. As the evening continued, Alexander noticed Emma's energy beginning to wane. Her smile remained bright, but her responses grew shorter, and she stifled a yawn behind her hand. When the first guests began to depart, he leaned close to her ear. "Ready to head home, Princess?" Emma nodded, the relief evident in her eyes despite her attempt to hide her fatigue. "I'm sorry. I wanted to stay until the end." "You've done beautifully," he assured her. 4 hours at your first major event is impressive by anyone's standards. The drive home was quiet, Emma half dozing against the window. Alexander watched her with a mixture of pride and concern, wondering if he'd made the right decision regarding Elijah's therapy. The rational part of him knew better than to expect miracles, yet he couldn't entirely suppress the hope that had taken root. By Sunday afternoon, Emma had recovered from the gala and was eager for Monday's first official therapy session. Alexander found her in her room, surrounded by medical textbooks and printouts of journal articles. "Studying up?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Elijah lent me some materials on neuroplasticity," she replied, holding up a book with dozens of colored sticky notes protruding from its pages. "The research is fascinating, Dad. There are documented cases of people regaining function that was supposedly permanently lost." Alexander picked up one of the articles, scanning its abstract. "These are legitimate journals." "Of course they are. Elijah's approach is based on established science just applied in an innovative way." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're still skeptical, aren't you?" "Cautiously optimistic," he corrected. "I want to believe this will help you, Emma. I just don't want you to be crushed if it doesn't work the way you hope." Her expression softened. "I know, Dad. But even if I don't end up dancing at my wedding someday, Elijah's exercises have already helped with the pain and stiffness. That alone is worth it." Alexander nodded, touched by her practical perspective. When had his little girl become so mature? Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. The converted therapy space adjacent to the pool was ready, equipment delivered and arranged according to Elijah's specifications. Dr. Sharma arrived first, planning to observe the initial session and establish baseline measurements for Emma's condition. When Elijah entered, Alexander was struck by the transformation. Gone was the casual gardener in worn jeans and t-shirts. Instead, Elijah wore professional athletic wear, black track pants and a fitted gray performance shirt that suggested the physique of someone who practiced what he preached. He carried a leather messenger bag containing what appeared to be medical files and reference materials. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington, Dr. Sharma," he greeted them, his manner confident but respectful. To Emma, his smile warmed slightly. "Ready to begin, Emma?" She nodded eagerly, already positioned on the specialized therapy mat in comfortable clothes as Elijah had instructed. "I'll need to conduct a thorough assessment first," Elijah explained, removing several instruments from his bag. "Some of these tests will establish our baseline for measuring progress." Dr. Sharma observed with professional interest as Elijah performed a series of evaluations, testing reflexes, muscle tone, sensation boundaries, and range of motion. His hands were gentle but clinical as they moved over Emma's legs. Alexander noted that while many doctors had performed similar examinations, none had shown Elijah's level of focused intensity, as if he were mapping every nerve and muscle fiber. "Your right side retains more sensation than your left," Elijah noted, making careful marks on a diagram. And there's stronger reflex response below the T10 vertebra than your previous medical reports indicated. Dr. Sharma leaned forward with interest. May I? He asked, repeating one of the reflex tests Elijah had performed. He frowned slightly at the response. That's indeed more reactivity than I observed during our last examination. The preliminary exercises I showed Emma have likely already stimulated some neural pathways, Elijah explained. Nothing dramatic, but it demonstrates responsiveness. The assessment continued for nearly an hour, Elijah documenting everything meticulously while explaining each test to Emma. Alexander was impressed by his thoroughness and the respect with which he treated Emma, not as a helpless patient, but as an active participant in her own recovery. Now we'll begin the actual therapy, Elijah said finally. Mr. Wellington, Dr. Sharma, you're welcome to observe, but I should mention that Emma needs to concentrate fully on the sensations and visualizations I'll be guiding her through. Too many observers can be distracting. I'd like to stay for this initial session, Dr. Sharma said firmly. Alexander nodded his agreement, as would I. Of course, Elijah replied smoothly. Just be aware that progress may be subtle at first. What followed was unlike any physical therapy session Alexander had witnessed before. Elijah combined elements of traditional stretching and movement with techniques that seemed drawn from Eastern practices. Throughout, he maintained a running dialogue with Emma, asking detailed questions about sensations, resistance, and mental imagery. Close your eyes, he instructed at one point, his hands positioned on either side of her right knee. Visualize the neural pathway from your brain to this muscle. See it illuminated, active, carrying signals effortlessly. Emma's face scrunched in concentration. I'm trying, but it's hard to imagine. That's normal, he assured her. The mind-body connection has been interrupted. We're rebuilding it. Try again, but this time, remember how it felt before the injury. Your body hasn't forgotten. Alexander watched with growing fascination as Emma's expression shifted from frustration to focused calm. After several minutes of this visualization exercise, Elijah gently attempted to stimulate a specific muscle response. To everyone's surprise, especially Dr. Sharma's, there was a faint but unmistakable twitch. Did you see that? Emma gasped, her eyes flying open. I did, Elijah confirmed, his professional demeanor briefly giving way to a genuine smile. Excellent work, Emma. That was voluntary movement, Dr. Sharma said, his skepticism giving way to cautious interest. Minimal, but definite. The rest of the session continued with similar exercises, each targeting specific neural pathways. By the end of the 2 hours, Emma was exhausted but exhilarated. How do you feel? Alexander asked as Maria helped her back into her wheelchair. Tired, sore, but good, she replied, her face flushed with effort and excitement. I felt things I haven't felt since the accident, Dad, like my body was remembering how to work. Dr. Sharma pulled Alexander aside while Elijah was giving Emma and Maria instructions for follow-up exercises. I'm not ready to call it a breakthrough, the doctor said quietly, but I'm admittedly intrigued. That voluntary muscle response shouldn't have been possible according to her previous assessments. What does it mean? Alexander asked. It could be that her injury was marginally less severe than we thought, or that these techniques are indeed stimulating some neural regeneration. Dr. Sharma shook his head slightly. I'd like to monitor this closely, run some additional tests. Over the next 2 weeks, the therapy sessions became part of the household's daily rhythm. Each morning at 9, Elijah would arrive at the therapy room where Emma waited eagerly. Alexander observed the first week's sessions, but gradually began attending only periodically, allowing Emma the space to focus without feeling watched. The changes were subtle at first. Increased sensation in previously numb areas, small muscle responses, improved circulation. But by the end of the second week, there was undeniable progress. Emma could now consciously contract several muscle groups that had been completely unresponsive before. "The rate of improvement is remarkable," Elijah told Alexander during their weekly progress review. He displayed a chart tracking various metrics of Emma's condition. Her neural responsiveness has increased by nearly 30%. Dr. Sharma mentioned that her latest tests showed some unusual activity, Alexander said, both hopeful and cautious. "He's bringing in a colleague to confirm his findings." "That's excellent. The more documentation we have, the better." Elijah's professional demeanor slipped slightly. "She's working incredibly hard, Mr. Wellington. Her determination is extraordinary." Alexander noted the admiration in the young man's voice, the slight softening around his eyes when he spoke of Emma. It wasn't entirely professional, and Alexander wasn't entirely comfortable with it. "She's always been determined," he replied neutrally, "even as a child." "She told me about her swimming competitions," Elijah said, "how she trained every morning before school." Alexander felt an unexpected twinge at the realization that Emma was sharing personal stories with Elijah. "Yes, she was quite the athlete. Her mother and I never missed a meet." A shadow crossed Elijah's face. "She talks about her mother often. It's clear they were very close." "They were," Alexander confirmed, his throat tightening as it always did when he thought of Catherine. "Emma is very much her mother's daughter." The conversation shifted back to therapeutic protocols and upcoming milestones, but Alexander remained distracted by his observations. There was a connection forming between Emma and Elijah that went beyond the professional therapist-patient relationship. Whether it was simply Emma's gratitude for the hope Elijah had given her or something more complicated, Alexander wasn't sure. What he did know was that his 12-year-old daughter was at a vulnerable age, emerging into adolescence while dealing with trauma and disability. And Elijah Carter, however well-intentioned and gifted, was a young man who had entered their lives under unusual circumstances. That evening, Alexander sat in his study reviewing Elijah's detailed progress reports. The methodical documentation was impressive, each session meticulously recorded, each improvement quantified and compared against baseline measurements. If nothing else, the young man was thorough. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Sharma entered, looking both tired and animated. "I've just finished analyzing today's diagnostic results," he said without preamble, placing a folder on Alexander's desk. "I wanted to show you personally." Alexander opened the folder to find brain and spinal imaging scans with areas highlighted in various colors. "What am I looking at, doctor?" "Evidence of neural activity where there shouldn't be any." Dr. Sharma pointed to specific highlighted regions. According to Emma's original diagnosis, these pathways were severed beyond repair. But these new scans show unmistakable signs of regeneration. Alexander stared at the images, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You're saying her spinal cord is healing?" "I'm saying there's activity that defies conventional medical understanding of her condition." Dr. Sharma removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Alexander, in 25 years of neurology, I've never seen anything like this. The colleague I brought in, Dr. Chen, a leading expert in spinal cord injuries, is equally baffled." "But it's positive, right? This activity?" "Unquestionably positive, yes. But the implications—" The doctor shook his head. "If Elijah's methods are indeed stimulating neural regeneration to this extent, it challenges fundamental assumptions in neurology. Spinal cord injuries of Emma's severity aren't supposed to improve this way." Alexander felt a surge of emotions: hope, disbelief, vindication, fear. What does this mean for Emma's prognosis? "That's the question, isn't it?" Dr. Sharma said. "Theoretically, if these regenerative pathways continue to develop, some degree of voluntary movement should follow. Whether that means standing, walking, or something more limited, it's impossible to predict." After the doctor left, Alexander remained at his desk, the scans spread before him. The scientific evidence supported what his heart had begun to hope: Emma might actually walk again. The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. He was still processing when Mrs. Winters appeared at his door. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Wellington, but I thought you should know—" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I found Emma and Mr. Carter in the garden just now. They were quite close." Alexander straightened. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Nothing inappropriate," Mrs. Winters clarified quickly. They were seated on the bench by the roses. Emma was crying, and Mr. Carter had his arm around her shoulders. When I approached, they separated immediately. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Did you hear what they were discussing?" "No, sir, but Emma seemed upset about something. When I asked if everything was all right, Mr. Carter said they had been discussing the emotional challenges of recovery." "Thank you, Agnes. I'll speak with them." Alexander found them still in the garden. Emma was back in her wheelchair, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. Elijah stood nearby, pointing out something among the roses, his manner deliberately casual as Alexander approached. "Emma," Alexander called, "it's getting late. You should be resting before tomorrow's session." She looked up, and Alexander was struck by the mixture of emotions on her face. Distress, but also a fierce determination he recognized from Catherine. "Dad, I was just talking to Elijah about—" "Mrs. Winters mentioned you were upset," Alexander interrupted, his eyes shifting to Elijah. "Is everything all right?" "Emma had a difficult moment," Elijah explained. "It's common during intensive therapy. The physical challenges trigger emotional responses, particularly regarding acceptance and expectations. I got frustrated during this afternoon's session," Emma admitted. "I couldn't make my leg do what I wanted, and I just broke down afterward. Elijah was helping me process it." Alexander studied his daughter's face, looking for signs of distress beyond the normal struggles of her condition. "That's understandable, Princess. But perhaps these conversations should include Maria or Dr. Sharma." A flash of annoyance crossed Emma's face. "Dad, Elijah understands what I'm going through better than anyone. He's been through this with his grandmother." "Nevertheless, I think it's important to maintain appropriate boundaries," Alexander said, the words coming out more sternly than he'd intended. "Professional ones." Emma's face flushed. "That's not fair. Elijah was just being kind." "It's all right, Emma," Elijah interjected smoothly. "Your father's right to be concerned about your emotional well-being." To Alexander, he added, "I apologize if I overstepped. My only intention was to help Emma through a difficult moment." Alexander nodded stiffly. "I appreciate that. But in the future, please involve Maria or myself if Emma becomes distressed." "Of course." Emma wheeled herself forcefully toward the house, clearly upset with her father's intervention. Alexander watched her go, torn between following her and continuing the conversation with Elijah. "Mr. Wellington," Elijah said quietly, "I understand your concerns. I would never do anything to hurt Emma or complicate her recovery." "I believe you mean that," Alexander replied. "But Emma is 12, Mr. Carter. She's vulnerable, physically and emotionally, and she's developing what appears to be a significant attachment to you." "I'm aware," Elijah acknowledged. "It's not uncommon in therapeutic relationships, especially with younger patients. The person helping them becomes a focus of gratitude and admiration." "And how do you feel about my daughter?" Alexander asked bluntly. Elijah met his gaze without flinching. "I care about Emma's well-being and recovery. I'm committed to helping her achieve her potential. Beyond that, my feelings are entirely professional and appropriate." Alexander wanted to believe him, but a father's instinct was hard to ignore. "See that they remain that way. Emma's physical progress is remarkable, and I'm grateful for what you're doing, but her emotional health is equally important to me." "I understand completely." Elijah's expression remained composed, but Alexander detected a hint of something, perhaps hurt or frustration, in his eyes. "If you'd prefer I limit our interactions to strictly therapeutic sessions." "That won't be necessary," Alexander interrupted. "Just be mindful of the boundaries. Emma is impressionable at this age. Later that evening, Alexander knocked gently on Emma's bedroom door. He found her in bed with a book, her expression still guarded. "Can we talk?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. She closed her book. "Are you going to apologize for embarrassing me?" "I'm going to explain why I was concerned," he countered. "Emma, I know how important Elijah has become to you, and I understand why. He's giving you hope, helping you make progress that no one else could. That's bound to create strong feelings." "It's not like that, Dad. I don't have a crush on him or something," she protested, though the slight flush in her cheeks suggested otherwise. "He just gets it, you know? He doesn't look at me with pity or treat me like I'm going to break." "I know," Alexander said gently, "and that's valuable. But there needs to be appropriate distance in a therapeutic relationship, for both your sakes." Emma studied her father's face. "You're worried he might take advantage of me somehow? Dad, that's ridiculous. Elijah isn't like that." "I don't think he would intentionally do anything inappropriate," Alexander clarified. "But emotions can be complicated, especially during intense experiences like what you're going through." "I'm not a little kid anymore," Emma said, a hint of defiance in her voice. "I know the difference between being grateful to someone and other feelings." Alexander held back a smile at her obvious discomfort with the topic. "Just promise me you'll talk to me if you ever feel uncomfortable or confused about anything that happens during therapy." "I promise," she said, rolling her eyes. "Can we talk about something else now? Like the amazing fact that my spinal cord is actually healing?" Alexander blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "Dr. Sharma told me during my tests today. He was pretty excited about it." Her eyes shone with a hope that Alexander hadn't seen in years. "Dad, Elijah was right. He said he could make me walk again, and the scans are proving it might actually happen." Alexander took her hand, cautious despite his own rising hope. "Let's take it one day at a time, Princess. The progress is remarkable, but—" I know. Marathon, not a sprint." She squeezed his fingers. "But Dad, for the first time since the accident, I can actually imagine standing on my own again. Do you know what that feels like?" He couldn't possibly comprehend the emotional journey his daughter was on, but he recognized the light in her eyes, the same determined gleam Catherine had shown during her battle with cancer years before Emma was born, a battle she had won against all medical predictions. "I'm proud of you, Emma," he said simply. "So incredibly proud." As the weeks passed, Emma's progress continued to astonish everyone involved. By the 1-month mark, she could consistently move her right foot on command and had regained significant sensation throughout both legs. The hydrotherapy sessions became a particular source of breakthrough moments, with Emma able to make swimming motions that had been impossible just weeks before. Dr. Sharma, initially the most skeptical, became Elijah's most vocal advocate in the medical community. He brought colleagues to observe sessions, documented every improvement meticulously, and began quietly preparing a paper on Emma's case for submission to a prestigious neurological journal. Alexander observed these developments with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Emma's physical progress was undeniable and thrilling, but as she improved, the bond between her and Elijah seemed to deepen. He noticed the way Emma's face lit up when Elijah entered a room, how she hung on his every word, the obvious hero worship in her eyes. For his part, Elijah maintained impeccable professionalism during therapy sessions, especially when Alexander was present. But occasionally, Alexander would walk into a room to find them laughing over some private joke, or catch a look between them that suggested a deepening connection beyond the clinical relationship. As the 6-week mark approached, Dr. Sharma requested a formal meeting to discuss Emma's progress and next steps. Alexander arranged for them to meet in his study one evening after Emma had gone to bed. "The results continue to be remarkable," Dr. Sharma began, spreading out the latest scans on Alexander's desk. "Neural regeneration is progressing at an unprecedented rate. The electrical stimulation studies we conducted yesterday show signal transmission across pathways we previously considered permanently damaged. In plain English, Doctor? Alexander requested, though he had become increasingly familiar with the medical terminology over the weeks. Emma's spinal cord is healing in ways that should be impossible according to established medical science, Dr. Sharma said bluntly. If progress continues at this rate, I believe she may achieve significant functional recovery. Walking? Alexander asked, the word still difficult to say aloud despite the mounting evidence. Dr. Sharma nodded slowly. Potentially, yes. With support initially, but independent ambulation is now a realistic possibility. Elijah, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. With your permission, Mr. Wellington, I'd like to introduce the next phase of Emma's therapy. We've been rebuilding neural pathways and stimulating muscle memory. Now it's time to begin weight-bearing exercises. You mean having her stand? Alexander clarified. Yes, with significant support at first. Parallel bars, a specialized harness system, and of course my physical assistance. Elijah pulled diagrams from his bag, showing the equipment setup. It's crucial that we begin training her body to support weight again while the neural regeneration is actively occurring. Dr. Sharma nodded his agreement. From a neurological perspective, the timing is optimal. The brain forms new pathways more effectively when they're immediately put to functional use. Alexander studied the diagrams, then looked up at Elijah. This seems like a significant step. What are the risks? Minimal physical risk with proper support, Elijah replied. The equipment ensures she can't fall. The primary concern would be psychological. If progress is slower than Emma hopes, it could be discouraging. Managing expectations remains important. When would you begin? I'd like to start next week. The support equipment should arrive in 2 days, which gives us time to set up and test everything. Alexander considered the proposal. The idea of Emma standing, even with support, seemed almost miraculous after 2 years of hearing that she would never leave her wheelchair. Yet beneath his hope ran a current of fear. Fear that it might not work, that the progress would plateau, that Emma's newfound hope would be crushed. I'd like to be present for the first session, he said finally. Of course, Elijah agreed. I was going to suggest that. Dr. Sharma gathered his notes, preparing to leave. I've been discussing Emma's case with colleagues, discreetly, using anonymized data. There's significant interest in Elijah's methodology. Several specialists have requested to observe future sessions. What do you think, Elijah? Alexander asked, watching the young man carefully. Are you ready for that kind of scrutiny? A complicated expression crossed Elijah's face. Pride mingled with something like apprehension. My primary concern is Emma's progress, but if sharing these techniques could help others with similar injuries, I'd be open to it, with your and Emma's permission. After Dr. Sharma left, Alexander expected Elijah to depart as well. Instead, the young man lingered, clearly wanting to discuss something. Mr. Wellington, there's something I should tell you. Elijah's usual professional composure seemed slightly strained. I've received an offer to present my research at a neurological rehabilitation conference in Boston next month. Congratulations, Alexander said, genuinely impressed. That's a significant opportunity. Thank you. It would mean a 3-day absence from Emma's therapy schedule. Elijah hesitated. I'm conflicted about the timing, given the critical phase we're entering with the weight-bearing exercises. Can it be postponed? Not realistically. The conference is the premier gathering in the field. It's a chance I never expected to have at this stage of my career. Alexander studied the young man before him, recognizing the internal struggle between professional ambition and dedication to a patient. You should go, he said finally. Emma's therapy can be adjusted for 3 days. The opportunity to present your work to experts could advance your methods more broadly. Relief crossed Elijah's face. Thank you for understanding. I'll prepare a modified regimen for Maria to administer during my absence. Does Emma know about this yet? No, Elijah admitted. I wanted to speak with you first, given the timing. Alexander nodded, appreciating the consideration. I'll help explain it to her. She'll be disappointed, but she'll understand. As predicted, Emma did not take the news well. Alexander broke it to her the following morning over breakfast, expecting some disappointment but unprepared for her vehement reaction. 3 days? Right when we're starting the most important part of my therapy? Her voice rose in dismay. Can't he present by video or something? Elijah has worked very hard for this opportunity, Emma, Alexander explained gently. Professional recognition of his methods could help many other patients. I know, but... Tears welled in her eyes. What if I lose progress? What if something goes wrong while he's gone? Maria will follow his instructions exactly. And it's only 3 days, Princess. Emma wiped her eyes, visibly struggling for composure. I'm being selfish, aren't I? You're being human, Alexander assured her. It's natural to worry about changes to something so important. But part of growing up is recognizing that other people have their own paths to follow, even when they intersect with ours. By the time Elijah arrived for that day's session, Emma had composed herself. Alexander observed from the doorway as she greeted her therapist with forced cheerfulness. Dad told me about the conference. That's amazing, Elijah. You absolutely have to go. Elijah knelt beside her wheelchair, meeting her at eye level. Are you sure? I know the timing isn't ideal. I'm sure. You've done so much for me. You deserve this chance. Her smile became more genuine. Just promise you'll tell me everything when you get back. Every detail, he agreed. And we'll make incredible progress before I leave, so you'll have plenty to practice. The weight-bearing equipment arrived as scheduled, and Elijah spent a full day setting it up and testing every component. The therapy room was transformed with parallel bars, harness systems mounted to ceiling tracks, and specialized support devices Alexander couldn't name. The first standing session was scheduled for Monday morning. Alexander arranged his calendar to be present, and Dr. Sharma arrived with 2 colleagues who had been following Emma's case. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and nervous energy. Emma, dressed in fitted athletic wear, looked both terrified and determined as Elijah and Maria helped position her in the harness system. This first session is about acclimation, Elijah explained to everyone present. The harness will support most of Emma's weight. We're not expecting independent standing today, just getting her body reoriented to the vertical position. Alexander watched tensely as Elijah made final adjustments to the equipment. Emma's face was pale but resolute, her hands gripping the parallel bars with white knuckles. Ready? Elijah asked her. She nodded, unable to speak. On 3, I'm going to activate the lift. You'll feel yourself rising slowly. The harness will support you completely. Just focus on how it feels to be upright. 1, 2, 3. The motorized system hummed softly as Emma was gradually lifted into a standing position, the harness taking her weight while her feet remained in contact with the floor. Alexander's breath caught as he saw his daughter standing, supported by equipment, yes, but standing nonetheless, for the first time in 2 years. Emma's eyes widened, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face: fear, wonder, disbelief, and finally, joy. I'm standing, she whispered, then louder, Dad, look at me, I'm standing. Alexander couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He managed a nod, blinking rapidly against the moisture in his eyes. How does it feel? Elijah asked, his hands hovering near her in case of any issue. Strange, Emma admitted, like my legs aren't quite part of me, but good strange. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'd forgotten how tall I am. The session lasted only 15 minutes, with Emma simply experiencing the standing position while Elijah monitored her vital signs and physical responses. When they carefully lowered her back into the wheelchair, she was flushed with exhilaration despite her exhaustion. That was amazing, she declared. When can we do it again? "Tomorrow," Elijah promised, "and each day will decrease the harness support slightly, allowing your legs to gradually take more weight." Dr. Sharma's colleagues were visibly impressed, talking in rapid technical terms about neural plasticity and proprioceptive recalibration. Dr. Sharma himself seemed almost emotional as he approached Alexander. "6 weeks ago, I would have staked my professional reputation on the impossibility of what we just witnessed," he said quietly. "Now I'm wondering how many other permanent conditions might respond to similar approaches." Over the following days, Emma's standing sessions extended in duration, with Elijah gradually reducing the harness support. By the end of the week, she was bearing nearly 30% of her own weight, a milestone that Dr. Sharma documented extensively with measurements and imaging studies. The night before Elijah was scheduled to leave for Boston, Alexander found Emma in the garden, sitting in her wheelchair beside her mother's roses. The evening was warm, the air heavy with floral scents and the buzzing of late summer insects. "Excited about tomorrow's session?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "Yes, but nervous too." She twirled a rose stem between her fingers. "Elijah thinks I might be ready to try taking a step with the parallel bars." "That would be a huge milestone," Alexander said, trying to keep his tone measured despite his excitement. "Is that something Maria can help with while Elijah's away?" Emma shook her head. "Elijah says we should wait for him to return before trying actual steps. The first attempt is critical, something about neural pathway formation." She sighed. 3 days feels like forever. "It'll pass quickly, you'll see." Alexander studied his daughter's profile, illuminated by the soft garden lights. "You've become very attached to him." Emma didn't meet his eyes. "He gave me back my future, Dad. Before Elijah, I'd accepted that I'd never walk again. Now," she gestured toward her legs, "now I can feel again. I can move again. And soon, I might walk again. Of course I'm attached to him." Alexander chose his next words carefully. "There's a difference between gratitude and other kinds of attachment, Emma." A blush crept up her neck. "Dad, please, it's not like that." "You're sure?" "Because it would be completely understandable if—" "I'm 12, she interrupted, her embarrassment evident. "And he's, I don't know, ancient." Alexander suppressed a smile. "Ancient at 26? You know what I mean." She twirled the rose faster. "Besides, Elijah doesn't think of me that way. I'm just a patient to him." "An important patient," Alexander corrected gently. "One he clearly cares about deeply." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Do you think he'll come back from Boston with job offers? From fancy hospitals or research centers?" The question revealed a worry Alexander hadn't considered, that Elijah's success might take him away permanently. "It's possible. His work with you is groundbreaking." "I don't want him to leave," she admitted in a small voice. "Not until I can walk on my own." "I'm sure he wouldn't abandon your treatment," Alexander assured her, though privately he wondered what would happen when the 3-month trial period ended. Elijah's methods were proving effective beyond anyone's expectations. If Emma continued to improve at this rate, he would be in high demand. The following morning, Emma insisted on an early therapy session before Elijah's afternoon flight. Alexander observed from his now customary position by the door as Elijah guided her through her standing exercises, the harness providing less support than the previous day. "Your core stabilization is improving dramatically," Elijah noted, making adjustments to the equipment. "I want you to focus on these alignment exercises while I'm gone. Proper skeletal alignment will be crucial when we attempt actual steps." Emma nodded seriously, concentrating on her posture as the harness supported her in the standing position. "Like this?" "Perfect," he confirmed. "Maria will work with you on this 3 times daily, just like we discussed." Alexander noticed the determined set of Emma's jaw, the way she pushed herself to maintain the position despite the evident strain. Her progress over the past weeks had been remarkable, but he knew that behind her external enthusiasm, lay fears she rarely voiced. Fears of plateauing, of disappointment, of hoping too much. After the session ended and Maria had taken Emma to rest, Alexander walked Elijah to his car. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Emma," he said. "6 weeks ago I couldn't have imagined the progress she's made." "Emma's determination is the key factor," Elijah replied, loading his bag into the trunk. "I've never seen anyone work harder or more consistently. Still, your methods are revolutionary. I imagine you'll receive considerable attention at this conference." Elijah's expression turned serious. "Mr. Wellington, I want to assure you that regardless of any opportunities that might arise, I'm committed to completing Emma's treatment. I wouldn't leave mid-process." Alexander nodded, relieved by the young man's integrity, yet aware that eventually Elijah would move on. "I appreciate that. Drive safely, and good luck with your presentation." As Elijah's car disappeared down the driveway, Alexander felt an unexpected mixture of emotions. Relief at having a brief respite from the intensity of Emma's therapy and the complex dynamics between her and Elijah. Anxiety about maintaining her progress in his absence. And beneath it all, an unsettling awareness that his daughter's recovery had become inextricably linked to this unusual young man who had appeared in their garden just 2 months ago. The first day without Elijah passed smoothly. Maria followed his protocols precisely, and Emma cooperated despite her obvious disappointment at his absence. Alexander observed the afternoon session, noting that while Maria was technically proficient, she lacked Elijah's intuitive understanding of when to push and when to ease back. On the second day, problems arose. Alexander was in a video conference when Mrs. Winters knocked urgently on his office door. He excused himself from the call to find the housekeeper visibly distressed. "It's Emma, sir. There's been an incident in the therapy room." Alexander rushed downstairs to find Emma sitting on the floor beside her wheelchair, Maria kneeling beside her, and Dr. Sharma examining her right ankle. "What happened?" Alexander demanded, hurrying to his daughter's side. "I fell," Emma said, her voice tight with pain and frustration. "It's my fault. I tried to do too much." "She attempted to take a step between the parallel bars," Maria explained, looking guilty. "I told her we should wait for Elijah, but I thought I could do it," Emma interrupted. "I felt strong today and I wanted to surprise Elijah when he got back, to show him I could take a step on my own." Dr. Sharma completed his examination. "It's a mild sprain, nothing serious. The harness prevented any significant fall, but her ankle twisted when she put weight on it unexpectedly." Alexander felt a wave of relief followed by concern. "Will this set back her progress?" "We'll need to modify the therapy for a few days to allow the sprain to heal," Dr. Sharma replied. "No weight-bearing exercises until the swelling subsides." Emma's face crumpled. "I ruined everything." "No, Princess, you didn't," Alexander assured her, helping her back into her wheelchair. "It's a minor setback, that's all. These things happen during recovery." "Elijah will be so disappointed in me," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He'll be concerned for your well-being," Alexander corrected gently. "And he'll adjust your therapy accordingly. This doesn't erase any of your progress." Later, after Emma was settled in her room with her ankle elevated and iced, Alexander called Elijah to inform him of the incident. The young man's voice was steady but concerned. "It's not uncommon for patients to push too hard, especially when they're making rapid progress," Elijah said. "The good news is that a mild sprain won't significantly impact our overall timeline. I'll be back tomorrow evening and we can adjust the therapy plan then." "She's worried you'll be disappointed in her," Alexander said. There was a pause before Elijah responded. "Would you tell her something for me? Tell her that determination is admirable, but patience is part of the process, and that I'm not disappointed. I'm proud of how hard she's working." Alexander delivered the message, watching as relief washed over Emma's face. "He really said that?" she asked, wiping away tears. "He did. Now get some rest. You heard Dr. Sharma? The better you follow instructions now, the sooner you can get back to your regular therapy." Emma nodded, settling back against her pillows. "I just don't want to lose any progress." "You won't," Alexander assured her, though privately he worried about the psychological impact of even this minor setback on her fragile hope. The following day, Emma's ankle showed improvement, though the swelling hadn't completely subsided. Dr. Sharma cleared her for modified therapy, focusing on upper body strength and core stability while avoiding any weight on the injured ankle. By late afternoon, Alexander found himself checking his watch repeatedly, aware that Elijah's flight was scheduled to land at 4:30. Emma was even more transparent in her anticipation, wheeling herself to the front windows every few minutes to scan the driveway. "He won't be here until at least 6, Alexander reminded her gently. "Traffic from the airport is always heavy at this hour." "I know," she sighed. "I just want to apologize in person." Alexander was about to suggest a distraction when his phone rang, an unknown Boston number. "Hello?" "Mr. Wellington, it's Elijah." The background noise suggested he was still at the airport. "I'm afraid there's been a complication. All flights are grounded due to severe thunderstorms moving up the coast. They're saying nothing will depart until tomorrow morning at the earliest." Alexander's heart sank, thinking of Emma's disappointment. "I understand. These things happen." "The problem is," Elijah continued, his voice tight with frustration, "I'm supposed to present preliminary findings on Emma's case to the Neurological Rehabilitation Panel tomorrow morning. It's the centerpiece of my presentation. Can't you reschedule? The conference ends tomorrow afternoon. I've tried, but there's no flexibility." Elijah paused. "Mr. Wellington, I have a rather unusual request. Would it be possible to conduct a video session with Emma? If I could demonstrate some of her progress remotely to the panel, it would salvage some of the presentation." Alexander considered the request. "I don't see why not. We have excellent teleconferencing equipment in my home office." "It would need to be more than a standard video call," Elijah explained. "I'd need Dr. Sharma present to verify the observations, and Maria to assist Emma with the physical components. And we'd need to position cameras to properly document her responses." "When would this need to happen?" 9 a.m. tomorrow. I know it's asking a lot on short notice." "We'll make it work," Alexander assured him, already formulating a plan. "Emma will be thrilled to help, and I'm sure Dr. Sharma will accommodate the request." After ending the call, Alexander went to find Emma, who was reading in the garden. Her face fell when he explained Elijah's travel delay but brightened considerably at the news of the video session. "So I'll be part of his presentation? Like a case study?" she asked, her eyes shining with excitement. "Exactly! He needs to demonstrate your progress to the panel, and he can't do that if he's stuck in Boston." "That's so cool!" Emma exclaimed. "Maybe I'll be famous in medical journals or something." Alexander smiled at her enthusiasm. "I'll need to coordinate with Dr. Sharma and set up the technical aspects. Why don't you rest that ankle so you'll be in top form tomorrow?" The next morning was a flurry of activity. Technicians arrived early to set up multiple camera angles in the therapy room, focused on the parallel bars and harness system. Dr. Sharma came prepared with his latest diagnostic results, and Maria helped Emma dress in fitted athletic wear that would allow the physicians to clearly observe her muscle movements. At precisely 9 o'clock, the video connection was established. Elijah appeared on the large screen mounted on the wall, seated at a conference table surrounded by distinguished-looking physicians. His professional demeanor was firmly in place, though Alexander detected tension in his shoulders. "Good morning, everyone," Elijah began. "Thank you for accommodating this unorthodox arrangement. I'd like to introduce Emma Wellington, the remarkable young patient whose case I've been discussing." Emma, seated in her wheelchair at the center of the therapy room, gave a small wave to the camera. "Hi." For the next 20 minutes, Elijah guided the proceedings remotely. Dr. Sharma presented the medical data, showing the before and after scans that documented Emma's neural regeneration. The physicians on the panel leaned forward, their skepticism gradually giving way to professional curiosity as the evidence accumulated. "And now," Elijah said, "with Emma's permission, I'd like to demonstrate the functional improvements we've achieved through our therapeutic approach." Alexander held his breath as Maria helped Emma into the harness system. He'd noticed his daughter wincing slightly when her injured ankle was jostled, but she'd insisted on proceeding despite his concerns. "Emma has recently experienced a minor ankle sprain," Elijah explained to the panel, "so we'll need to modify today's demonstration slightly." "It's fine," Emma called, her voice steady despite the tension Alexander could see in her shoulders. "I can do this." The physicians watched intently as Maria adjusted the harness to provide maximum support. Emma gripped the parallel bars, her face a mask of determination. "We'll begin with supported standing," Elijah directed. "Emma, remember your core engagement techniques." Alexander's heart swelled with pride as Emma assumed the standing position with the harness's assistance. Despite her injury, her posture was noticeably improved from her first attempts, more natural, more controlled. "Remarkable stability for a patient with her diagnosis," one of the physicians commented. "Now, Emma," Elijah continued, "I'd like you to demonstrate the neural pathway stimulation exercise we've been practicing. Right leg only, please. No weight on the injured ankle." Emma nodded, her focus absolute as she executed a series of subtle movements with her right leg. The precision of her control elicited murmurs of appreciation from the panel. "Dr. Sharma," Elijah said, "would you please confirm for the panel the extent of Emma's original injury?" As the doctor detailed the severity of Emma's spinal cord damage, Alexander watched his daughter's face. The technical medical terminology describing her irreversible condition contrasted sharply with the reality before them. Emma, standing, moving voluntarily, defying every prognosis she'd been given. "Mr. Carter," one of the physicians interrupted, "your results are undeniably impressive, but without weight-bearing demonstration, it's difficult to assess the functional significance. Is there any way to—" "I can take a step," Emma interjected, her voice ringing clear in the therapy room. Alexander tensed. "Emma, your ankle." "Just with my right leg," she insisted. "I won't put weight on my left." On the screen, Elijah's expression was professionally neutral, but Alexander caught the subtle tension in his jaw. "Emma, there's no need to push beyond what's comfortable today. The panel understands the circumstances." "Please," she said, meeting Elijah's eyes through the camera. "I've been practicing the visualization exercises every day. I know I can do this." A silent communication seemed to pass between them. Trust, understanding, shared determination. Finally, Elijah nodded. "Maria, please adjust the harness to allow limited forward movement while maintaining maximum support." Alexander moved closer, instinctively wanting to be near Emma if she faltered. Dr. Sharma positioned himself on her other side, monitoring carefully. "Remember," Elijah instructed, his voice gentle yet focused, "this isn't about distance. It's about neural pathway activation. Visualize the connection from brain to muscle, just as we've practiced. When you're ready, slide your right foot forward while keeping your weight on the bars and harness." Emma closed her eyes briefly, her face a study in concentration. Then, with excruciating slowness, she shifted her right foot forward an inch, then another. Her arms trembled with effort as she supported herself on the parallel bars. "Excellent," Elijah encouraged. "Now transfer a small amount of weight onto that foot, only what feels secure." Alexander watched, barely breathing, as Emma eased a fraction of her weight onto her right leg. It held. The room was utterly silent except for the soft hum of the harness system and Emma's measured breathing. "Now the most important part," Elijah said. "Bring your body forward, allowing the left foot to drag slightly. Remember, no weight on that ankle." Emma bit her lip, gathering her courage. Then, in one fluid motion, she pulled herself forward, Her left foot slid across the floor, following her right. She had taken a step. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "I did it. Dad, did you see? I took a step." Alexander couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He simply nodded, blinking rapidly against his own tears. The panel erupted in professional excitement, questions overlapping as the physicians tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Dr. Sharma was already taking notes, documenting every aspect of the milestone. On the screen, Elijah's composure finally broke, a smile of genuine joy transforming his face. "Incredible work, Emma. Absolutely incredible." The remainder of the demonstration continued in a blur of technical questions and medical discussions. Emma, exhausted but elated, was eventually lowered back into her wheelchair, where she sat beaming with pride and accomplishment. When the video call finally ended, Dr. Sharma approached Alexander, his expression thoughtful. "What we witnessed today challenges fundamental assumptions about spinal cord injuries," he said quietly. "If Elijah's methods can be replicated consistently—" He shook his head in wonder. "This could change thousands of lives." Alexander nodded, watching as Maria helped Emma back to her room to rest. "Elijah mentioned he'll try to get a flight back tomorrow morning." "Mr. Wellington," Dr. Sharma hesitated, "I feel I should inform you. Elijah received several significant offers during the conference. Research positions, clinical directorships. His work has generated tremendous interest." A cold knot formed in Alexander's stomach. Did he indicate he was considering any of them? Not explicitly, but opportunities of this caliber are rare, especially for someone without completed medical credentials. After the doctor left, Alexander sat alone in his study, contemplating the implications. He had always known Elijah's time with them would be temporary, a stepping stone in the young man's career. But the prospect of his departure now, with Emma's progress so promising yet fragile, filled him with anxiety. More concerning was how Emma would react. Her attachment to Elijah had only deepened with each breakthrough. Losing him now might devastate her emotionally, potentially even undermining her physical progress. Alexander was still mulling these thoughts the following afternoon when Elijah's car finally pulled into the driveway. Emma, who had been stationed by the window for hours, called out excitedly, "He's back! Dad, he's back!" Alexander went to the front door, watching as Elijah retrieved his luggage from the trunk. The young man looked tired but energized, a new confidence in his bearing that hadn't been there before the conference. "Welcome back," Alexander greeted him. "How was the remainder of the conference?" "Overwhelming," Elijah admitted. "After Emma's demonstration, I was surrounded by specialists wanting to discuss the methodology. The panel has requested comprehensive documentation for potential clinical trials." "Quite an accomplishment," Alexander said carefully. "Dr. Sharma mentioned you received some offers." Elijah nodded, his expression turning serious. "Several, including a research directorship at the Neurological Rehabilitation Institute in Chicago." Before Alexander could respond, Emma wheeled herself onto the porch, her face alight with excitement. "Elijah, did you see all the messages I sent? Dr. Sharma says I can try 2 steps tomorrow if the swelling stays down." Elijah smiled, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "I did see them. Your progress is remarkable, Emma. I'm so proud of you." Alexander cleared his throat. "Emma, Elijah has had a long trip. Why don't we let him get settled and you can tell him everything over dinner?" Once Emma reluctantly retreated inside, Alexander turned back to Elijah. "We should discuss your plans. The Chicago position sounds prestigious." "It is," Elijah agreed. "State-of-the-art facilities, significant research budget, opportunity to train other therapists in these methods." Alexander steeled himself. "When would they expect you to start?" Elijah met his gaze directly. "They're eager to begin as soon as possible, but I declined the offer." Alexander blinked in surprise. "You declined? But your career?" "I made a commitment to Emma's treatment," Elijah said simply. 3 months minimum. potentially longer depending on her progress. I won't abandon that commitment halfway through, regardless of the opportunity." Relief washed over Alexander, followed quickly by confusion. But this could be a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Surely they'd wait a few months? Perhaps. But there's another factor. Elijah's expression softened slightly. "I've proposed an alternative arrangement to the Institute, a research partnership with the Wellington Foundation focusing on replicating these treatment protocols for a broader patient population." "A partnership?" Alexander echoed, intrigued despite his surprise. "The idea would be to establish a specialized treatment center here in Connecticut, funded jointly by the Institute and the Foundation. I'd oversee the clinical applications while continuing Emma's therapy, and eventually train others in the methodology." "And they were receptive to this idea?" "Very. Your foundation's reputation and resources, combined with the preliminary results we've achieved with Emma, it's a compelling package." Elijah hesitated. "Of course, I should have discussed this with you before proposing it. If you're not interested—" "No," Alexander interrupted. "It's an excellent idea. Exactly the kind of innovative research the Foundation was established to support." He extended his hand. "Let's discuss the details tomorrow. For now, I'm just glad you're back. Emma missed you." "I missed her too," Elijah admitted, shaking Alexander's hand. "Her determination is inspiring." 3 months later, Emma stood in the garden, her hands lightly resting on a specialized walker. The autumn air was crisp, leaves drifting from the trees to settle among Catherine's roses, now preparing for winter dormancy. "Ready?" Elijah asked, standing a few feet away, his hands extended toward her. Emma nodded, her face set in concentration. Slowly, deliberately, she took one step forward, then another, and another. 6 steps in total before reaching Elijah's outstretched hands. From the terrace, Alexander watched, his heart full. Emma's progress had continued to exceed all expectations. She could now walk short distances with minimal support, and Dr. Sharma's latest prognosis suggested she might eventually achieve independent ambulation. The Wellington Neurological Rehabilitation Center was under construction on the eastern edge of the estate, scheduled to open in the spring. Elijah, now the center's designated clinical director, had been working closely with architects to design the perfect therapeutic environment. As Emma completed her circuit of the garden path and returned to the terrace, Alexander saw something in her face that had been missing for too long, not just hope, but confidence, certainty in her own future. "Dad, did you see?" she called, lowering herself carefully into a garden chair. "That's a new record, 63 steps without resting." "I saw," he confirmed, joining her. "Your mother would be so proud." Emma smiled, her eyes drifting to where Elijah was making notes in his ever-present clinical journal. "Do you think she would have liked him?" Alexander followed her gaze. "Elijah? Yes, I think she would have. Your mother always appreciated people who challenged conventional thinking." "I'm glad he stayed," Emma said simply. "So am I, Princess." Alexander squeezed her hand. "So am I." In the garden beyond, the last roses of the season turned their faces to the autumn sun, hardy and resilient against the approaching winter. Just like his daughter, Alexander thought. Just like his extraordinary, determined daughter who defied every limitation placed upon her. And as he watched Emma chatting animatedly with Elijah about her next therapeutic milestone, Alexander reflected that sometimes the most remarkable journeys begin with the simplest of statements. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." And sometimes, against all odds, they turn out to be true.